So, what do you get when you cross Castlevania, Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, with a little Mega Man and Metroid sprinkled in, with 1,000 ways to die in medieval days of old? You get a bloody good time, that's what you get. Welcome to Aces High Gamers, and this is my review of Infernax. Infernax is an 8-bit retro-style, open-world, side-scrolling action-adventure slash RPG slash platformer developed by Berzerk Studio and published by the Arcade Crew. Infernax was released on February 14, 2022 for the Nintendo Switch, Xbox consoles, PS4, and Steam. So, how does the pixel art Dark Souls-esque game do? Let's find out. Before we get started, big thank you to the Arcade Crew for sending me the review code. The game starts off with a pretty comical message regarding the content of the game and asking if you're cool with it. Are you? Because I am. You agree with a menu very similar to the Legend of Zelda series where you pick your save files and you can name or use the default name of the main character. Now, our good guy, so far he's a good guy, is returning home to find his land being invaded by monsters and dark magic, and it's up to him to save the day. But it's not as simple as beating dungeons, killing the final boss, and then all is saved. No, 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 no. This game is a morality system with branching paths based on the choices that you make and the actions you take throughout the game, some of which may not be even totally obvious to the player. The other interesting point here is that said choices aren't blatantly obvious on which path they're actually going to lead you down. Now, you may think you're going to help end the suffering of a poor lost soul, when in fact, certain particular decision here may actually have the townsfolk looking at you like a merciless brute. Now, the decisions also influence what side quests become available and from whom. Now, the game has multiple endings that are based on the life choices that you make, who you choose and not choose not to help, as well as in the manner that you decide to complete some of the tasks that are given to you. There's a day and night cycle which changes up the types and the numbers of monsters that happen to populate your screen at any given time, and a plethora of bosses to fight, all at different times, not just at the end of a long dungeon. Now, there are unlockable characters to use after beating the game, as well as a hidden area which will allow you to put in codes. It's kind of influenced by the Game Genie, basically, helps change up the game in various ways. Adding all of these elements together helps give Infernax a very modern feel, a very modern twist to an otherwise standard and more or less recycled gameplay loop. Getting into the monster hunting of it all, you start off with a plain old mace and basic armor to dispatch the hordes of evil, or maybe do some various acts of evil, who knows? You collect gold coins along the way by doing so as well. Helps you purchase better upgrades and increase your strength and your defense. There are flasks that you can fill with different types of potions. There's also different spells and skills you can purchase, find, or earn to help enhance your lethality and survivability as well. But also it allows you to traverse previously locked away locations. Now, fun fact, depending on certain choices made in the game, you actually may end up with different spells or possibly different variations of them. For example, we'll use the shield spell. On a certain particular playthrough, you can get it upgraded where it's going to heal a little bit of health while also increasing the defense along with it. On the other perspective, you have a set of fireballs that'll appear around you that'll help damage other enemies. So think of it kind of like the light and dark side of the Force from Star Wars, if you will. Now, as you slay thousands and thousands of demons and creatures, you're going to accumulate XP to help increase the strength of your swing, increase your maximum health, or increase your maximum mana, with the cost of the experience increasing with each of these upgrades exponentially as you level up. Moving into the sensory aspect here, let's first touch on the controls. So with all of these options, how does the game play? All the buttons are utilized here with attack, jump, potion, and spells all being used on the face buttons, and you also have quick swaps for your potions and spells on your shoulders and your triggers. Controls are very snappy with very little to no input lag. Attacks come out very quickly while hitting the button, ends up hitting multiple enemies if you happen to be close. Spells pause what's happening on the game prior to casting so you won't be interrupted or knocked around. And jumping is really precise, which is very important, especially later in the game when the jump puzzles tend to be a little bit more complicated that require the use of an actual skill to help proceed forward. Now, as mentioned earlier, this is a retro style 8-bit pixel art game, taking very heavy influence from NES games of old, while also using a more larger surface area for higher definition character portraits and a little bit of cutscenes. The visuals here use a very nice color palette with good contrast to make everything stand out and pop, albeit certain areas tend to not be as detailed as they could be. But then again, let's remember that where this game is getting its influence from and what it's trying to be. The day-night cycle is more than just raising or lowering the brightness on the screen. Now, obviously, there's going to be a color change, but that's not all. NPC guards are shown walking around carrying torches to help light the way during the night. Residents of the town will end up locking their doors, being inside during the night, help protect themselves from any kind of monsters. There's going to be less people roaming around, and as mentioned earlier, there's going to be more beasts plaguing the landfall during the night, and they're actually going to be a little bit stronger, I guess, over the cover of darkness, versus during the day, you tend to have less enemies, and they're going to be a little bit weaker generally. The NPCs do have that older look, that generic style look to them, each sporting different colors and palette swaths and such to help show the different variation between them, although there are more important NPCs that happen to have a little bit more detail. Minor enemies are plentiful with a lot of variation that you end up fighting, while bosses tend to be much larger in size and also are very unique in their designs. You can see that there's a lot more thought and detail that went into their looks. Now comes some of the fun stuff. The game is bloody violent. You've got decapitations, you end up getting people's faces crushed in, raining blood and guts that show after a boss is defeated. Who knew that a game that could be this detailed in this style of art, especially for, short scenes that show some of the finer details in the insides of these grotesque creatures. Death comes in various forms in this game, and each has its own little mini scene that turns the screen red, with only a black silhouette of our hero getting maimed, stabbed, burned, crushed, disintegrated, impaled, etc. Now, the sound effects and the music are what you would come to expect for a retro style game. Sounds are simple yet informative, from the swinging of the mace to the contact it makes to help confirm that you're hitting an enemy, as well as also having a visual representation each time you hit them. Exploding bodies, the crashing of downward strikes, the casting of spells, everything has different sounds, so nothing is overused or ever lost in translation. The music in each of these locations and dungeons is very unique and very thoughtfully put together. The overworld theme is a little bit more upbeat, while dungeons take on a darker and deeper tone to help set the mood. Areas and fights of more intense action call for faster paced music, not only keeping up with the gameplay, but also enhancing these scenarios. You get a bit of a sense of urgency or even dread when a beast, 10 times your size, or a fat pile of lard with an eyeball bigger than your head socketed into its stomach is trying to vaporize you into oblivion. Onto the pros and cons, this game hits on a lot of levels. The morality system is a great addition to a game of this caliber, helps make it feel different on the second and third playthroughs. There are hordes of enemies at every turn that gradually get stronger as you proceed in the game, helps add a level of detail and variety and difficulty. Plenty of skills and spells to learn and use, as well as upgrades to your equipment and attributes, help give Infernax a nice RPG feel, while not making the player feel over encumbered with lots of menus and a huge inventory full of useless crap. Everything has a purpose in this game at least a few times. Controls feel very snappy, very responsive. Everything related to the senses of this game screams old school nostalgia. This game is definitely something you could see that would have been made during the 80s or early 90s. Aesthetics and gameplay just flat out work with games from that time period. Changes to some of the NPCs during the day and night cycles, as well as the varying enemies during such times, adds a nice touch and shows the attention to detail that the team at Berzerk paid attention to. The music hits on all points, from calmer tones during downtime to upbeat in-your-face action during boss fights. Now, it's not all brooding darkness and putrid gore when it comes to Infernax. At times, the next destination was unknown to me after completing a task or dungeon. Now, I'm not asking for the game to hold by my hand by any stretch, but during my first playthrough, there were numerous times where it was unclear of where I needed to go next. But, like anybody else, it took some exploring to help figure it out. There's also an NPC at the starting town that does give hints, but the idea of having to backtrack every time I ended up getting stuck was a little daunting. This until you end up, getting the teleport spell, which made doubling back a lot less annoying. Now, without giving too much away, there's a specific dungeon that requires a specific trigger to allow you to enter it. The clues given by the NPCs nearby really didn't spell it out for you on what you actually needed to do, and I ended up roaming around aimlessly for over an hour trying to figure it out. Now, here's a little clue to the said location, not to give too much away, help you guys figure it out on your own. But sometimes the simplest or even most random answer happens to be the right answer. Try a couple of things out. Now, moving along, some of the jump puzzles in later dungeons especially ramped up the difficulty curve to 11 out of nowhere, particularly in areas that required a jump, and then an area skill immediately after required almost pinpoint accuracy and timing that resulted in numerous failed attempts and forced restarts. Considering there are no saves inside the dungeons, this means going back through the previous areas over and over and over again. There's nothing stopping you from exiting and saving and then re-entering should you not want to lose any particular item you got, XP that's collected. But again, the backtracking through the hazards can be frustrating to say the least. Last thing I'll mention is that most of the bosses seemed a little too easy to kill. Not necessarily pushovers, but their patterns were very simple in nature, and some of them only had a handful of attacks in total. Other boss fights were a bit more complicated with additional hazards as well as different phases to their fights. Now, I did just mention, the dislike for backtracking, so that obviously means easy bosses means things are better, right? Not exactly. A couple of times, I didn't actually feel too threatened by the bosses. I didn't really have a need to panic heal where I was in fear of taking that last hit that was going to send me back to the proverbial purgatory that is backtracking. All of this now brings us to value. The game is priced at $19.99 USD digitally, or you can get a physical copy from Limited Run Games for $34.99 for the standard edition, or $64.99 for the limited collector edition that includes a copy of the game, of course, retro-style box and box art, a folded map, and a pin. Check the conversion rates to figure out your country's regional equivalents. Now, at the time of this recording, both versions from Limited Run on both the Switch and the PS4 are currently sold out. There is no physical release from Limited Run available for Xbox, however, the game is free to play on both PC and Xbox Game Pass. Aside from its few shortcomings, Infernax is a very solid and extremely fun title to play. It offers a bit of a challenge that games from this generation are known for and are not seen as frequently here in the modern era. Responsive controls and various skills and spells, along with RPG and upgrade elements, make the gameplay loop most enjoyable while never getting too stale or boring. Visuals and sound in this pixel art style are aesthetically and audibly pleasing and goes double for older fans who grew up with games like this. Definitely tugs on the nostalgia strings here. The biggest contributing factor to value in this game is the replayability. A single playthrough of the game will take someone anywhere between 4 to 6 hours to beat start to finish. With multiple endings, other characters to unlock, and various codes to change the way you play, you're looking at around 15 to 20 hours at least to unlock and do everything. So now we're finally at the verdict. Now, I don't give out scores for games. What I like to do is keep it simple with my suggestions for all my viewers. Should you buy this now, later, or never? Infernax is a 100% buy it now, or in the case of Game Pass, you should play it now. You get a lot of blood for your buck here with a fun yet challenging gameplay loop with enough extras to make it come back to kill for more. That's going to do it for my review of Infernax. Tell me what you all thought of the refined format of my review here. I welcome any kind of constructive criticism. If you liked the video, throw a thumbs up my way, and also tell me what you think of the game in the comments below. Are you enjoying it, stuck somewhere, love it, hate it? Or let me know if this review helps sway you in one direction or another in terms of playing it or buying it. I would love to hear from you all. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll catch you all later on.